let's get started. So, what do we have today for engineering management? Well, we have lecture number 3 of the information systems series. If we could settle down a little bit so I don't have to yell over people talking. If you go into the bhacker.com website and you look under summer 2013 and you go into engineering management, we are in the managing innovations lecture number 3. So we're going to kind of cover that one, and then we're also going to cover the technology management. We'll cover one from there. So what we're going to try and do now is sort of get into certain topic areas. The second part of today will starting with supply chain management and customer service management and how technology is used to organize and maintain those functionalities, and the concept of the engineering component and engineering management part of it. But before we do that, let's look at the value that information and data and systems have in terms of an investment. And this one is lecture number 3. So in terms of the learning objective, discussing how organizations use the information, organizational learning, strategic advantages associated with that, which is kind of like along the lines of what I've been discussing so far in terms of valuing systems. So if we look at the value of a system, because you guys are technology managers or engineering managers, would be engineering managers, the technology is your major concern or your engineering component, and the management of those particular systems is one to be in particular with. So valuing the system is kind of an important issue, and because you don't want to put money into a new system implementation or into purchasing or acquiring a system or into using one unless there's some sort of return on that investment or some sort of value. Somebody's talking somewhere. I can hear you way up here. Much better, thank you. It's distracting to everybody around you as well as me, and I'm way up here. I can hear you. All right, so information systems used in 3 different ways to add value to organizations. I've actually given you some of this information already. What I want to do is put it into a different framework and give you some more examples and kind of conclude on this concept here in terms of the added value. So we get automation, informating, and strategizing. I've given you some strategic advantages and some strategizing information. I've given you some automated information and automating, and today we're looking at the informationing, or the informationing, if that's even a word in terms of the value added. So the business value added goes up with these 3 components. You can see that the strategizing has got the most. It's the biggest part of the chart, which means for strategic advantage, the use of the systems, use of the technology and implementing it correctly adds the most business value. What does not add as much business value is automating. So originally, if you talk about what an MIS person does or what an IT person does, a lot of their job is automating. They're taking a manual process and they're making it automatic. So as an example, resume processing. There's almost no company these days that actually reads a resume. It's all automated. They receive thousands of resumes. It goes into electronically into a system. And the system is a database of some sort, and then you can query the database to kind of find out what am I looking for and some keywords and things, which is a form of automation. So it's a concept of using a shopping cart or a sales engine or a point of sale system, stuff like that. So you can see it doesn't give you very much business value, although it gives you a little bit. It saves you a few costs, and we talked about the bottom line, the top line last time we met. It just definitely helps with the bottom line. But informating is kind of in the middle, but then strategizing, if you use it to strategize, you're going to make a little bit more profit out of it. It's going to add a little bit more value to the business, which is why we've been focusing on strategizing. So do things faster. If you're automating, you're trying to do things faster. Or you're trying to cut down on labor. Or you're trying to be more accurate, which is another good point as well. So in automation, tasks can be completed faster, cheaper, more accurate, with greater consistency and greater uniformity between different people doing the same job, which is it goes into that concept of Taylorism that I may have mentioned a couple weeks ago, actually. where you standardize the job, you supplement it with technology to automate it, then you find the right people to do that job, and you train them to do the job so that it's basically there's more consistency, and then you take the blame or the problems of things that go wrong out of the person doing the job, and you put it up into higher management, so which is a good example. So here's another example of automating. Let's say loan processing. Comparison of the 3 different methods from the moment the customer takes the application until the application is notified. Applicant is notified of the decision. The manual loan process takes 25 to 40 days. Could you imagine waiting 40 days to get a loan processed these days? It doesn't necessarily happen. In fact, if you didn't get it done in a week, you'd think there was something wrong with the bank or something. Technology supported process goes between 5 and 20 days. People are good with that, actually, to a certain point. But a full automated processing takes between 1 hour and 15 days. It could still take 15 days, especially if you have to get things done through the mail. So 1 hour, though, is pretty good. You can usually get an approval on something within an hour if the process is fully automated. So, in terms of organizational learning, doing things better, so this was an example of doing things in an automated fashion. To do things something better, information systems could also be used to learn about processes and improve processes, and then also support organizational learning, which is kind of interesting. We'll get into knowledge actually in the next couple more weeks from now, where we have knowledge as being a company asset actually, and the technology housing and facilitating and disseminating that knowledge so that the knowledge can be shared. Because knowledge doesn't have any value to it unless it's shared, actually. So in terms of doing that knowledge engineering, the systems themselves can improve the support for that. It can actually provide some of that engineering backbone. So this is the area of informating. Basically improving the communication and the support for organizational learning and having the organization not make the same mistakes twice. So you might think, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about people? No, we're talking about the organization. So people work in the organization. You always think about people making mistakes, but the organization itself could possibly be the problem and not necessarily people working for it. And an organization is kind of defined by the people and also the processes and the business tasks that are being performed in the company as well. In terms of informating, an example of informating might be this one here, where we have a computer-based loan system that identifies peak times during the year when specific loans are processed. So you're looking at the peak times. So we have winter, spring, summer, and fall. You can see the levels change. So during the winter, people have lines of credit card usage going on. So your banks are loaning through Christmas and seasonal shopping kind of things. In the spring, it's people are moving, so it's home mortgage stuff, and auto is a little bit higher. Boat, recreational vehicle, a lot more recreational spending. In the summertime, people are really moving. There's a lot of increase in home mortgage. And then auto loan, boat. So in the fall, nobody's moving. So we don't have anybody with any home mortgage, but we have a lot of auto loan stuff going on because people have moved, and now they realize that they have a longer commute than they had before, or they have a commute or something of that nature, or maybe they don't have a commute and they're selling their car or something. So a lot of auto loan activity in the fall. So doing things smarter in the strategizing mode here. IS is used to gain some certain or sustain or gain some competitive advantage, turning benefits of automating and information into strategic advantages to some point in terms of strategizing. And then we have our 5 types of organizational strategies. So let's see, types of competitive advantages being pursued. We've gone over this. This is Porter's model of the five conflicting and strategic alliances going on. So organizational strategies defined in a way companies can gain and sustain competitive advantage. So just to refresh your memory on that, what we're looking for is either going to be the low cost or best cost provider as a provider strategy, a focus on low cost strategy, or let's say focus on differentiation, making ourselves different than the rest of the world, or a broad differentiation strategy in terms of that. So depends on our marketing goal and our strategies in terms of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And using Porter's model can kind of simplify things to a certain point. So we know about the low-cost leadership strategy. So I was saying some of the stuff we've seen before, so I'm going to kind of skip through of it. Don't need to necessarily repeat. There's a little bit of overlap between some of these lectures. So, but providing the best price in the industry, product services, a broad focus, our low-cost strategy, offering the best prices, focusing on niche markets, sort of like the Dell, the Walmarts, and stuff like that. And then the differentiation strategy we saw before. This is a different example than what we saw before. This is the Nordstrom's example in terms of the broad focus on providing niche market products to certain people, to certain groups of people who want things specially done, or custom fitting and stuff like that. Better products and services, focusing on the niche is the Apple market, actually. High quality computers, home and educational markets. Actually, Apple was in the educational industry for the longest time. They're still sort of considered more of an education provider, actually. They used to provide a lot more funding for schools and discounts for education, stuff of that nature. So we also have the best cost provider as a strategy, which is our target model, providing products reasonably good price, competitive prices, good quality products, mediocre quality products. People are willing to compromise if it's a price consideration for the most part. So that's the target model. So sources of the competitive advantage in terms of the strategizing model. Best made product on the market. Superior customer service. Well, we'll talk about that in the second part of today's lecture in terms of CRM, customer relationship management. What about achieving the low costs than rivals? Well, providing better cost pricing than our competitors, or maybe having some proprietary manufacturing technology. This is really the key these days, is being able not only to produce the product, but to produce at a reasonable price, at a reasonable level of quality is associated with it. So a lot of companies are actually hiding what they're doing in terms of their manufacturing strategies. Getting specialties, and getting special processes, special ways of doing something. If you remember, well, maybe you guys don't remember, but it was sort of like an old thing. If you guys remember Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC, the secret recipe. And then we have Mrs. Fields and her secret recipe. Well, if you're baking cookies or making chicken, you're going to have a secret recipe, right? Well, now we have secret recipes in the areas of technology. How do we get industrial design to look that way? How do we get that brushed metal finish? How do we get... And so certain products are coming out, and in fact this is like something that just started maybe about a year ago, where it's specialty. There's a secret ingredient. It's usually proprietary manufacturing technology. It's a sourcing for a particular fiber, particular... you see it in like leather goods and stuff, different types of leathers, different grades and stuff. You see it in different products. It's a kind of a wide concept, but it has something to do with a special, secret manufacturing process or technique or something that's being used that's giving the company competitive advantages. It's differentiation. It's making them a little bit different. Also having shorter lead times in research and development of projects, getting the product out faster. That would be most of your internet companies these days. They think of a product and then it's on the market or it's on the internet. If they wait too long, somebody else is going to beat them to it. So, not only that, but sometimes they can't. Somebody else can't beat them without the infrastructure, without creating it. So, also having well-known brand and reputation also helps in giving customers more value for their money. Also good consideration as well. So we've seen Porter's value chain. And that's basically the answer to how to identify opportunities in information and competitive advantages. And so we've seen the analysis. We also saw the concept of the value chain and value chain analysis as well. And just to give you the bigger picture, because last time we saw it in a slightly different context with more of a competition strategy. Here's more of a big picture logistics. So we have the tools used by managers to identify the opportunities and gain competitive advantages. Here we have the purchase supplies, inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, sales. These are the same things we saw last week actually in the value chain model, but they're presented a little bit differently with how are the different departments going to be working with these different functionalities. And the global impression here and kind of the trend is that it's not just product R&D, technology, systems development that's working with operations, as an example. It's working with everything. It's working with service, sales, marketing, purchasing, supplies. Everyone's sort of integrated together these days, so it's not just that department. Also, human resources works across the board, and so it's like general administration, general areas of the company. So think of it more like in the lines of spreading out the responsibility for service, as an example, to HR. It's like, well, how does HR have to do anything with service? Well, it's part of their global perspective as well. So it's not just housed in separate departments or in separate responsibilities, it's everybody's responsibility. So it kind of flattens the line a little bit. In terms of the value chain analysis that we've seen here, linking the systems together, use of the internet, use of intra and extra nets as well together. And this is where we're going to come up with the supply chain management scenarios that I'm going to start in with in the second part of today's lecture. But the interlinks, and this is kind of going to show you the big picture in terms of the different linkage between the different components of this value chain, where we have the interlink with the suppliers and the dealers are going through the outbound logistics, and then we have, according to the operations, the computer-aided manufacturing systems and things that are being facilitated by part of the operations, and then the links with suppliers, dealers, and then website, online products, services going through sales and marketing, and then our service department here for customer service responses and stuff. So what we can do is come up with big global enterprise-wide systems for CRM, for ERP, for supply chain management, which spreads out the responsibility and the usage throughout the entire organization instead of departmentalizing it or making it part of one department. But it's kind of the interesting trend these days, actually, when it comes to system developments. So making a business case for a system. So identification of the benefits and the proposed information will bring the organization automating benefits, information benefits, and strategic benefits. Most people in an engineering manager kind of situation are going to be faced with new system implementation or the selection of a new system or some way of implementing the technology to help the company to one point or another. And in one of these days you're going to be ending up sitting in a meeting and someone's going to say, well, can you justify this? What benefit is it giving it? What are we going to get from this? And what I'm going to do is kind of go through a couple of examples of how these investments are justified. In terms of productivity gains, that's a kind of a no-brainer. Everyone wants, if you're the manager and you're going to be asked, well, here's this new CRM system, okay? What benefit is it going to give us? It's going to make us more productive. So usually you're going to go cost-effective, productivity, efficiency, accuracy. You could probably label it a couple of different ways to make it sound appealing. But how do you really justify it? And the cost is associated with it. It's sometimes not necessarily a matter of having to do that, more so than having to sell it to management. So easy to identify costs with developing an information system because you can see what it's going to replace if you're looking at an automation or if you're looking at an informative gathering information or using information. Now it's all about gaining knowledge in the company, so it's gathering and using the information. There might be difficulty in identifying the productivity gains that might come out of it. So there are limitations or limitation to the productivity gains and development of the information system. Why hasn't productivity increased in the rate that the system investments have? That's a good question. Actually, it's usually after the fact. You buy the system, you put it in, and you go, okay, so you told me that this thing was going to make us 20% more productive. and it hasn't. Or, we were going to, be able to cut costs, or it hasn't. So we have this paradox of productivity. So we have unintended ways that technology is actually being used. Web surfing, junk mail, games, good example right there. So you make an entire system that's automated, and then you have productivity loss due to it because the job's too easy now. So, or we have too much access to external systems, or So let's take a very controversial subject into point today, and everyone is going to disagree with me when I say this, but then think about it another 5 years from now, once the thrill of the new device is worn off. So there's this big trend is starting. It hasn't really made it to California yet, but it's all over parts of the internet. It's called dumb technology, or dumb phone, because everything is supposed to be smart. So your smart devices are making you dumb, is the thing that's going on. So why is it? Okay, so if people buy smart devices, smartphones, tablets, computers, and then they rely on it. So as an example, if I were to ask anyone, you probably would remember your home telephone number. Maybe, are you going to remember your spouse's work number? No. Are you going to remember, your kid's teacher's number? No. You're not going to remember anything. In fact, you'll be lucky to remember any of your closest friends, maybe. Maybe their telephone numbers. Okay, so you're not going to remember telephone numbers, which is okay. You don't necessarily have to. Your smart device can keep track of that. But what it's done, and there's a whole entire series of development in this, and you really have to read through the research in order to appreciate what's going on with this. But for the longest time, they've been trying to introduce this smart stuff into schools. So a lot of the educational research goes, how productive is this? So now we have children that can't read and write. So we've gone full circle. We started with bad, and this is just from studies in the U.S. actually, and it's only from a limited time. We really have to wait another 20 years before we can actually see the effect, or 15, 20 years before we can actually see the effect. But it's kind of like when you take a first or second grader and you give them an e-book, and you have a little button on there and it reads the book to them. Are they going to read the book? No. They're going to listen to the book. Or let's say, for example, you don't even give them a book. So in the state of California, they're taking out most textbooks, and they're making you have PDF files and stuff. Well, who's going to read the PDF file? Nobody's going to read it. It's hard to see what you're doing when you have the tablet in front of you. So the studies are showing that they're not reading the books. They're playing video games, or they're doing other things with the tablets, which means they're not reading. Which means it's either a distraction or it's the wrong use of the technology, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. So there's a lot of people that get into car accidents. They get hit by cars crossing across the street, from looking down and, to walking and typing at the same time. Don't have to tell you how the increase in automobile accidents from texting and driving and yada yada. I'm not here to promote or don't have an initiative here. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's making us dumb, which is what it's doing for a lot of companies too. So a lot of companies figured, automate everything, get everybody a computer, get everybody online, get them all connected. And then now you have people that update their Facebook status while at work. And you have people that spend most of their time on social media playing around instead of actually doing a job, which is counterproductive. So the paradox is the more technology you give the employee, which is the same as your life, the more technology you give yourself in life, the dumber you get and the less productive you get. Because now you're spending all your time playing games, or you're communicating, or you're text messaging back and forth. And your level of productivity, even in your personal life, goes down. And it makes you less intelligent because you're not spending time reading a book. You're not spending time communicating with others. You're not learning anything. You're not doing anything. You're wasting time text messaging. Hey, how are you? Fine. How was your weekend? Good. Back and forth for hours on end. But this has been going on for centuries. They said this when television sets came out originally. The kids, in fact, it's still a problem in the U.S. They blame TV on childhood obesity because kids in the U.S., they sit and eat in front of a TV all day instead of going out and playing. Or they blame video games on violence, or smartphones on dumb people. You know, it's just a different device, different technology. However, it actually has the same effect on companies. So companies go out of their way to make themselves more technical and more advanced, and they give all of these things to their employees. And then the paradox is, yeah, it's always used for the wrong thing. It's always used for... So the trend actually now is take away. Take the internet off of computers that don't need it. Some people, you don't need the internet in your daily life. You don't need, not your daily life, in your daily work life. You're doing research and development, what do you need the internet for? You know, or you're doing sales, customer service, what do you need the internet for? So some companies are actually starting to remove it so they don't get the unintentional surfing, the consequences that are associated with it. And actually, believe it or not, a lot of companies, and I'm waiting for the trend to happen in California, which it hasn't actually, are banning cell phones from the workplace and computers from the workplace. So you can't bring a computer in and sit down. In fact, most companies around here, bigger companies, won't allow you to bring in outside equipment because they're worried about you taking something with you. Also the responsibility of having the phone, but there's been issues with banks actually around here, in actually the state of California, where they've had a lot of fraud, and I'm sure I've mentioned this one as an example a couple of times. But if you just take the cell phones out of the situation, you eliminate half the problems. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a retail store to meet a customer service person who's been sitting there on the phone. They're not helping you find a product. They're not even helping you do anything. They're just wasting time, essentially. So that's the paradox. You introduce new technology to make people more productive, and you make them less productive at the same time. So junk mail, personal emailing, web surfing, shopping, gaming. So measurement of the problems. So the benefits are difficult to quantify. So the wrong things are measured versus efficiency and effectiveness. So as an example, ATM, a strategic necessity. So what we have here is a measurement that goes on between productivity paradox. Are you putting the technology in to make things better, or are you making it worse? Along with the redistribution, mismanagement of it, maybe some time lags between, how long did you put it in, how long was it good for, how long is the technology going to improve, and measurements. So time lags. The time lag is describing the benefits do not always occur at the same time that the system is implemented. Actually, it's kind of the same thing with the ATM scenario. People don't use ATMs, which is kind of interesting. ATMs. Do people really use the scan the check kind of thing? No. How many people just want to walk into a bank and make sure that the transaction went through properly? Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah. Even if I had it on my phone, I wouldn't be scanning my checks. Although, the banks would love you to do that. So some implementations require training. Most of them are like big SAP and PeopleSoft implementations. You put this into the company, and you expect your people to be up to speed on it, and they don't know what to do with it. And so half the time, and maybe a couple years later, they figure out, oh, we have this system. And at the same time, maybe they have 2 or 3 different systems that all do the same thing, because somebody didn't realize that this system did this. And so now they have multiples. Or the system must be integrated with existing systems, and it's not, which is kind of interesting. So you put in a new online banking system, which is kind of ironic, and you don't integrate it. I'm sure you guys all do online banking, right? Yeah. See, I've never caught on to online banking. What do I need to do online that I can't do on the phone? I don't know. I'd rather ask questions on the phone. It's faster. But then again, do you know there's a social media disorder going on? And social stress anxiety, something or other. There's like a whole big old word to it, description of it. It's like when you have to check the balance on your account so many times a day. Or you have to check in to your email so many times a day. And if you don't do it, you get anxiety, panic. You actually have a physical disorder associated with not being up to date. Like if your phone were to die, like the battery would stop working on the phone, it'd be like major crisis in your life, at least for until you get the battery charged back up again. That's a disorder. So, redistribution. And so if we're not working with the time lags, then we can kind of consider the redistribution. So it may redistribute a piece of the pie rather than making the pie bigger. It just redistributes it. So we have efficiency gained in some area causes less efficiency somewhere else. And we're just redistributing the lack of or the increase. So increases in market share come at the expense of competitor market shares or something. The competitors themselves, their market share isn't going up as high because ours is up that high or something. So mismanagement. Yes, bad business models cannot overcome by good information systems. It doesn't really matter how good your systems are. If you have really poor management, you have bad systems, because the systems are only as good as the people running the systems. So the implementation is a temporary fix, not such a good idea, but creation of unanticipated bottlenecks and things that would happen with that as well. So making a successful business case to justify the use of the technology to increase the productivity or the efficiency or the competitive advantage or any one of the models that we've been looking at, it's difficult to quantify the benefits of information systems and technology. In fact, that's why these people are the first ones to go in a layoff. So first one to get laid off essentially are the technology people who are spending all the money in the company. Oh, we don't need that person. When in reality, that's probably the person you need the most. And money doesn't grow on trees, so maybe it should. It actually does, sort of, as paper, bark. And need to make a strong business case based on faith, fear, and facts. So hopefully more facts than fear, faith, in terms of it. So let's see, arguments based on faith. Arguments based on the belief about organizational strategy, competitive advantages, industry forces. Using industry forces is actually kind of a good way of presenting it. And then customer perceptions is also a good kind of way of looking at it. Example, Procter & Gamble. Actually, people have faith in Procter & Gamble products. They've been around since I don't know when, but it's like early 50s or before, perhaps. When you see the brand, you think, oh yeah, faith. You have faith in there. What about fear? Keeping up with the competitors, keeping up with the economy, based on the notion that a system is not implemented. The company might lose to its competitors or go out of business or something. So you base it on an example, the automotive industry. Actually, the automotive industry is definitely based on fear. Fear of gas prices, fear of things like XM radio or, power windows. I guess power windows are the de facto standard these days. You can't produce a car if you don't have everything that everybody else has, because no one will buy your car. So factors in terms of the investment decisions, often considering when to present the arguments based on fear. So there's actually a strategy. I don't really buy into the strategy, but there is one where there's times in which to base the argument for the investment on faith, fear, or fact in terms of the consequences and in terms of the scenario that you're working with. So if we have industry factors and technology factors that are coming in, we can consider the business strategy, and then we can go around to the investment motive and say, well, if we invested in this system, and then we can bring some facts into it and then restructure. So in the next lecture, when we start looking at ERP systems and CRM and supply chain management, you'll go, oh, that's why we have to base this on something. It's hard to tell a company that they need to spend $200,000 on an ERP system, actually. And they're like, why do we need this system? Maybe you don't need the system. And if you don't get the system, then what's going to be the problem? So fear, factor, faith, essentially. So we've seen Porter's 5 forces model and how that works together in terms of the framework. So keep that in mind in terms of analyzing the framework. So the arguments based on facts. Facts are hard to dispute. The arguments might include data, quantitative analysis, and indisputable factors. So generally say, well, the number of people between this age and this age is increasing, and we make a product that does this. Maybe we should change the product around a little bit, because otherwise we're going to lose that market share or something. So, or perhaps, based on facts, a lot of our employees don't come to the office anymore. They stay at home and they work remotely. So what if we had a little bit more security with maybe put in some RSA key authentication or something, so that when the employees are connecting, seeing how they're doing most of their work that way, then maybe we can make it a little bit more secure, because the fact is eventually we're going to get hacked into, and kind of work it through that line. Primary tools also might be associated with cost-benefit analysis, identifying the costs, the benefits, and the contrasts between the two. Benchmarking, not on the slide, but it's also a good thing too. If you can show some benchmarking with some competitors, that actually works quite well. When you say, look, XYZ company, our biggest competitor, they put the system in, and now they're making 20% more sales. So if we put the system in, we should be making that too. But we're better than them, so we should be making even more. Or seriously, just a cost-benefit analysis from a traditional business sense, and identifying what it's going to cost, and then looking at the total cost of ownership, which is different than the total cost of the system. Because one of the interesting things is when you're looking at technology and you're going to implement a system, you're implementing more than just going to Fry's and buying a piece of software that you're going to pay something for. Actually, nobody goes to Fry's to buy software anymore. Go to the internet, download some software, and you paid $29.95 for it. Well, the cost of the ownership of that is a little bit different, because then you have the training that you have to give your employees to use it, the uptime, how long does it take for that system to come up, how long is it going to stay up, what kind of upgrades, what kind of patches, what kind of hardware support you're going to need for it, which actually kind of plays a big ownership cost to it. So cost of acquisition, cost of the use, cost of the maintenance. So total cost of ownership is definitely something to consider. Recurring, non-recurring costs, tangible, intangible costs might be associated with it as well. Identifying the benefits. So the tangible benefit, the 5% increase in sales that you might get, or the reduction in the order entry errors. Actually, a lot of companies to begin with really want to reduce errors. They want to be more efficient, because if you're off by a penny and you do that with 1 million customers, that's a substantial amount at the end. And also intangible benefits might be to improve the customer service. So I would say that the quality of customer service has gone down actually from a personal perspective. I can say it feels like it's not as good as it used to be. I think the internet did a lot to that as well. Customer service over the internet isn't quite the same, and most customer service is over the internet these days. And then improvement in the overall perception of the firm. It's kind of interesting, but that plays a huge factor as well. So, and it doesn't even depend on what industry you're in. It's just the perception of the company in general. Lends itself to a lot of problems if it's damaged in any form. So contrast to the total expected tangible cost with the total tangible benefit. Well, I can do a break-even analysis if we wanted to, or do a net present value analysis. So we're using traditional accounting and traditional financial management kind of analysis scheme. So it's well-proven formulas from the business world to come in and say, well, can we justify that? And when are we going to break even on it and identify the point where the tangible cost is equal to tangible benefit? And we can move forward from that point. So the weighted multi-criteria analysis, it's a way of deciding between alternative investments and alternatives of the same system. Because the interesting phenomena is that there's a way of implementing the technology with product A, product B, product C. There's not just one choice these days. It's kind of like how if you had the decision to buy a car, how many different cars there are out there. You got to pick between all your different choices, and they all do the same thing because they're all the same. They all cost the same thing, and so most people would pick it on a non-rational basis. They go, oh, I like the color or something, you know, or I like this one, I like that one. And then they're going to use like information that's not based on facts, it's based on opinion. So we have our criteria here, we have our requirements, and then we can have the weighted that we're going to associate with alternative A, B, and C. And then we can have a rating, and then we can have a score that might be associated with it as well. Are we ready? Okay. So I think we're going to do attendance right now. So let me pause this. Okay, we're back. What was I talking about? I was talking about the alternatives, ways of justifying decisions to be made between competing products of the same type. So what we have here are the alternative A, B, and C. They're all the same program. They're all the same application. And we're looking at the requirements and the constraints that are associated with them, and we're trying to make a decision justified. So it's kind of like a weighted analysis to a certain point. And I will tell you, most people have their own different ways of making decisions in terms of what you're going to select. If you just think about your own decision process on how you select a computer or how you select an electronic device, very similar, except for in a business, you have to have some reason outside of... I'm sorry? Yeah, she just they're down the hall.
Sorry?
You might...
After class, you could go up to Bill's office.
Oh, okay. After class. Presenting the business case in terms of the analysis, so to persuade decision makers in the firm to make a decision to the direction that you're wanting to see it done, you don't want to know the audience and you want to identify the stakeholders groups. So in a lot of cases it's knowing the right audience, which is going to give you the best results in terms of your decision. Because if you're pitching to the choir, you're preaching to the choir, or you're pitching to the non-participating entities or non-participating management, you know, you can talk all you want, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to persuade them to do anything at all. So in terms of the management, the perspective is there's representatives or managers from each one of the functional units that might have a focus in terms of greater strategic focus, larger group size, longest project duration. I'm not going to go through all of these, but considering the stakeholder, their perception, their perspective, and what it is they're looking for in terms of their goal, and then focusing on the project characteristics that meets their particular objectives. Then you want to convert the benefits into monetary terms, because nobody thinks about, oh, it'll make us more productive. But if you say it'll make us 25% more profitable, that's a little bit, you know, or it's going to earn us this such and such amount of money more a year, then that's a little bit more convincing. So the new system says, at least in this particular case, 1 hour per day for 12 mid-level managers. So then you can say, well, we can quantify this by looking at $30 an hour. That's pretty cheap. Number of managers affected, 12, and then do the math and say, well, that's annually $90,000. Sounds pretty big. So that's if you can actually do that. And actually, kind of the interesting thing is, if you're a manager in a decision-making mode and you're trying to decide on a system and you can't come up with any of this, nothing at all, you probably shouldn't be buying the system. So, because, you know, even if you can't come up with something that's like even remotely, look, it saves us $1 or something, why bother? It's only going to essentially get you fired eventually, because you'll be spending money that the company's not even using. It has no benefit to outweigh the costs. So presenting the business case in terms of devising the proxy variables, looking at are used when, let's say we want a clear-cut assessment, it's not possible, and we have to come up with something, smoke and mirrors, measuring the perceived value of the change. Look, it'll make us more visible in the marketplace. And how are we going to be able to do that? Who knows? Is it really going to do that? Who knows? So, which is actually kind of a good example of this would be when companies first started putting together websites. And, you know, do we really need a website? Well, there's a proxy variables to kind of consider with that. We don't know what it's going to do for us. Companies right now are doing it with apps. You know, so does your company need an app? I don't know. How are you going to know until a company puts one together? A company like Pizza Hut or something, actually those guys are doing great with the apps. You know, you just go to the app, you order your pizza right through the app. You just press on a little picture and stuff. Much easier than calling on the phone, and then it shows up. You go pick it up, or it gets delivered. You know, or appointments. But does does the post office need one? I don't think so. I don't know. For the longest time, post office was never online. I'd like, maybe, does your bank need an app? I don't know. Is it like online banking? Maybe. I don't know. So a lot of companies have taken the concept and went, well, isn't it just like a website? And then just put it on an app. So, and then another 5 or 6 more years from now, there'll be something else. And then companies will, well, do we need that? Sure, why not? But they don't know what benefit's going to give them. And then measuring what is important to management as well. The case becomes more meaningful if it promotes the management goal. Management says, oh, we're into sustainable energy, and we're green, and oh yeah, look, we'll be saving a lot of paper. Oh, it's all electronic now. Management would really like that, actually, so in that particular case. So focus on senior management's hot buttons, those issues. Not to say that you need a reason to promote your system or to sell your system to the company, but it might help you in the long run. Assessing the value here as well, presenting a holistic view, the economic value, the architectural value, operational value, regulatory compliance value. That one actually is kind of an interesting one, especially in the field of education, compliance and regulatory value. Are you keeping grades correctly? Are you assessing student work correctly? Are you producing the information that needs to go in the transcripts automatically without doing anything manually? Are you archiving student grades and transcripts? That's kind of an interesting question as well. Some of it, you're putting the system in not necessarily to make the company green, you're putting it in to make them compliant for the most part. You're viewing it as an asset rather than as a necessary expense. It's not supposed to be an asset. So it is an asset, but it's not necessarily needing to be one. It's not necessarily needing to be an expense either. So how do you value innovations? That's another problem. Just, so if we don't have a system that we're putting together, and we want to, let's say we're going to, innovate, what is better? I mean, is it better just to leave things alone, or is it better to innovate? And how do you put a value on innovation if you're going to do it that way, or if you're going to do something innovative? Which is kind of interesting because we put the whole same value system on our own personal lives. We say, what if I got into this career? Aren't you innovating your career? You're changing it. You're inventing something new. But why? When you've worked at this other career for 20 years or 30 years, why innovate? Why change now? So which new technology will make or break your business? That's an interesting question, if anything at all. So what's on the horizon? Well, laser-based hard drives, flexible displays, intelligent surfing, voice prints, nanotubes, speech recognition, brainwave interface, quantum computing, knowledge webs. Actually, a lot of data mining stuff, not on the chart. Knowledge webs, I was thinking about data mining actually. Actually, that's another good question, and in fact, probably a little too late for Google to start asking this question. But what value is the data mining that they're doing going to add? It might not add too much value. In fact, a lot of people don't like it. It's like an invasion of privacy. When every one of your email messages or one of your Facebook posts, or not Facebook, but Google Docs, and anything Google product oriented gets collected and mined and housed and used. Is it really, what value is that innovation? It's highly innovative, but what value is it going to add to Google as a company? Interesting question. I don't know. But then again, security is kind of a hot topic these days, especially in the last week or so with telephone security. You know what, though? A lot of people don't realize that the Patriot Act actually gave us, we all voted for it, too. We all told the government it was okay. And they can actually do more than just see who we're calling and see how long we're talking to that person. We actually gave them the right to record the conversation and to listen in on our conversations. We gave it to them. We voted it into Congress. And then what does it take, a couple of people to leak it out? Or one guy leaked it out, I guess. They just discovered yesterday, I think, who the guy was that leaked it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't have to really. But those people who are paranoid about telephone calls, I guess the government's been listening in on our calls, some of them. So, long story short, the American people gave it to them. We already agreed to it. There's no controversy there, which is kind of funny because, you know, in the state of California, we also agreed not to let illegal aliens go into our school system. But we still have a problem with our school system full of illegal aliens because even though we voted it in, we don't enforce it because they don't want to enforce it, although we voted it in. So it's kind of interesting, the politics in this country. So successful innovation, to get back on topic, is difficult. Well, innovation in general is difficult. Innovation is often fleeting. Advantages of gained innovations are often short-lived, if there's any advantage at all. It's like, you know, when people say, oh, we're going to innovate. We're going to take out all of our computers and we're going to put in tablets. Great. And then it works for a couple months. Okay, yeah. Enough of that. Nobody's using it or something. It's often risky. Sometimes even superior products can lose the race. Blu-rays versus HD. Yeah, Blu-ray didn't stay around too long. Actually, there was another item that they had out there, laser discs. Does anyone remember those? They were on the market for maybe a year, 2 years, right before CD-ROMs, or DVDs. Right before the DVD became popular, we had Laserdisc. Yeah, so it's interesting. And that was very innovative. You switched everything over to Laserdisc. Innovative choices are often difficult. Foreseeing the future is not always possible. In 1994, the internet was not given much attention. Actually, the WW2 and WW3 is given a lot more attention now than WW1. So, organizational requirements for innovation. So we need some. In order to innovate an organization. So you're the engineering manager. You come on in, and you're totally into innovation, and it's the company goal to make things innovative. And all right, let's do it. Let's innovate everything. Well, the company needs to have a process requirements, so the organization has to be willing to do whatever it takes to implement the change. So if you're going to put something in, then change. You know, if you're going to put, everyone's going to have tablets now, well, then let them take the tablets home with them, or let them put the apps on there that they need to put on there in order to actually make that worthwhile. If that's what the case is, but most likely they'll be putting games on there. So. You also have to have the resources, and resource requirements need to have human capital necessary to successfully deploy the system, which is actually kind of interesting as well. You need essentially the people to be knowledgeable, to be working with the system, to use the system. So, and then you have to be risk tolerant. So if it doesn't work, you have to be able to pull it out and sell it. So you must have appropriate tolerance of risk for uncertainty, which is actually kind of interesting because we have another lecture we'll see probably in a couple more weeks from now. We have different approaches to technology advancement. So some people are like first triers, and then they're late adapters, and there's a whole level of different personalities for people in terms of trying. Well, they're also for employees. So you have some employees that won't try anything, they won't do anything. And they're usually late adopters. They'll wait until everybody else does it, and they'll fight it, kicking and screaming, because they're adverse to change. If you have a company like that, you're not going to be very innovative in the long run, especially if not in that department. So how do you predict the next big thing or next new thing? That's pretty interesting. Look into a crystal ball and say, hey, this is going to be the best thing. Deciding which innovations to adopt is very difficult. The classical view of adoption. We have the majority in the middle, we got the laggards, and we got the innovators. So technically you want to be here. If you're in engineering management, you've got to be an innovative, or even in the majority, you can't be a lagger. You can't be technology adverse. Hardly too many people that work with technology don't like technology, and they're late adapters. There's an economist that actually puts this in terms of society and income level and education. And the higher the education, the higher the income, the more innovative they are. The lower the income, the lower the education, they're laggers. They'll wait several years before adopting to something. It's like, oh, we have color TV now. Oh. We have flat screen TVs now. Oh, okay. Look, there's cable. Hey, what about the internet? And then they're the late adopters. So, the innovator's dilemma. We have disruptive innovations. Yeah. Actually, this is more often the case than anything else when you disrupt the environment by innovating it. Because you're making people adapt and they maybe not necessarily want to adapt. And you're giving them a product or service they don't really even need. Classic example, and I hate to bring it up this way, is this thing here. These things are so much more expensive. Very innovative, these smart projector things. I don't know if we even have the pens anymore. In fact, they're so innovative. They're cutting edge technology. Way above and beyond what we actually need here. And it's disruptive. Well, I use this as a projector, but it's actually a smart projector. And there's a pen. I've never used it, but you can record with the pen. You can actually record everything on here and then put it into a document reader and vice versa. And I think we only have one instructor here, Dr. Real. I think he's the only one that actually uses it. And he uses it with this document reader, I think. But I'm not even sure. Don't even quote me on that one. Nobody else didn't even know what to do with it. But it's in every one of the rooms. But is it disruptive? No, because I can still figure out how to turn it on and off. But when they first came in, it was kind of destructive. Because I'm used to a regular projector. You just press a button. Show me, show it to me. Because it's just projecting what's on my computer. But this thing does so much more that I'm so glad we don't have to use it. Because then you'd be sitting up there trying to figure out, well, I don't know what the thing does actually. I don't even know what it does. But it's definitely innovative. So, but it's also a complete waste of money. When a simple projector would have worked. In fact, it's kind of, you could probably have the same argument for most of our personal electronics. In fact, most people have multiple cable systems, or some people do actually, or you have multiple service providers for certain things. You have AT&T and you have Comcast, or you have multiple different things. Instead of bundling it all together, instead of making it simplified, you just have duplicates of everything, which is like duplicate emails, but that's not a big problem. So what do we have here in disruptive innovation? New technology, products, or services that eventually surpass dominant technologies. Online versus brick and mortar retailing. Automobiles versus horses. Yeah. We have CDs versus records, MP3 versus CDs. So this is actually going to change. And if you don't adapt to it, you'll end up not being able to play music if you don't have a CD or MP3. Undermining effectiveness of management practices is also another problem. So making it impossible to manage because you have too much technology or too many things going on, so you have too many loopholes in it. So here's some disruptive innovation examples. 1970s, mid and high performance users were bulk on the market. Digital equipment tried to sell those to those markets. Microcomputers seen as toys, actually. Yeah, actually most computers these days are now being seen as appliances. So it's an appliance. The computer is basically turned into an appliance. You turn it on, you do something with it, you turn it off. So it's not like really a computer these days. So you don't need a computer degree to operate an appliance like a washing machine or a toaster or a computer. It's pretty much the same. Actually, your computer now is turning into, your TVs are now turning into computers because they have this smart. That is a good example of an innovation gone bad. It's not disruptive, but it's useless, senseless. And it's kind of like how, you have a TV and you have an internet access. Why do you need them together? When you can hook your internet access into your TV manually on a computer. But now they make the TV with the internet on it, so it's all in one. The smart TVs, but then they control the content, but they put a web browser on there, so you still have to hook it up to your wireless network, and then you can watch the internet on your TV. Why don't you just take a DVI cable and hook your computer up to your TV? Who's going to pay extra for it? It's basically they can't give those systems away now because no one's going to pay. No one's going to buy that thing. But it was a good idea, right? It was very innovative. Who needs it? Nobody. 1980s, microcomputers focusing on low performance users' needs, ignored by DEC actually in the beginning. Yeah, actually, that's the trend right now anyway. It used to be that everything was, well, I think I've told you my thin to fat to thin client theory. Things used to be thin in the old days, and then they went fat, and now we're back to thin again, because now we have tablets. So, actually, there's a couple of economists out there that say that notebook computers are going to be a thing of the past soon. And those, oh, the netbooks are already gone, but who needs that when you have a tablet hybrid? You have the tablet, you just click the keyboard into it, you know? What do you need a notebook computer for? You have the keyboard, you have a mouse, you have the tablet, and then it's more versatile that way. So, you can carry it around with you. So, alright, so this example here is about failure for DEC to compose to the consumer market instead of the big business market. Actually, that was one of the biggest problems with IBM, but they're still hanging in there. They sell to businesses. They have big server systems, but they don't make computers anymore, or PCs anymore. So, 1990, grow performance into the mid-range market. DEC loses biggest market share. They didn't see the pattern shift correctly. Today's microcomputer marketing entire markets are met by other companies. DEC out of the business. Next, disruptive innovation: 3G and 4G mobile phones. Well, 5G. 6G, I don't know, just keep going up. Actually, we're still on 3G, 4G. Or better yet, 4G LTE. You know what the LTE stands for? Yeah. It's fiber optics in between the towers. It's really 3G service with fiber optics in between the towers. So it should be 3.5G, because we don't use halves anymore. It's 3.5G. 4G, I don't know. Actually, at this point, it probably is 4G because they were improving it. So, the innovator's solution after you go through the dilemma of what is going to be the next biggest thing, we don't know. So, disruptive growth engine helps organizations respond to disruptive innovations more effectively. So, the solution is to start early, be early adapters, and have some executive leadership leading the project. Build a team of expert innovators, and then educate the organization. This is how we do things now. This is what we're supposed to do. So implementing the innovative process. Well, that's easier said than done. How do you teach people to be innovative in a company? And if you're the manager and you want your team to be innovative, it's like taking out a dartboard and start throwing darts at it. Going to hit something. Which is actually, believe it or not, a proven way of being innovative. It's called brainstorming. You know, it's going to hit something. And so let's see, in an e-business innovation cycle, we can actually build a cycle around it. The key to success is the extent of IS used for timely and innovative ways. If we look at the e-business cycle, so. Choosing enabling emerging technologies, matching it with e-commerce opportunities, and then business innovation for growth, and then assessing external customers and internal client value. Or client value is actually the most important. So if we look at the e-commerce market, and I'm only going to give you the technology part of it, because e-commerce is a huge category, huge business topic. In fact, you can major in e-commerce in some companies, universities. If we take a look at what retail stores have done, it's primarily organizing the inventory and the pickup and the customer service is what they've done. So they've been innovative in a cycle. They started out by getting it out there, getting online, getting sales. And I'll just take Best Buy because they're a pretty good model. And then they made it so that it was equivalent to their stores, yet it was still different. Now it's better than their stores and is more up-to-date than their stores, and the more preferred method. In fact, you go into a store, not just them, but most stores in general, especially computer stores, electronic stores, they have more selection online than they do in the store. And for the most part, the salespeople are going to say, go online, go look it up, go order it, and then you can come to the store and pick it up. Which is kind of interesting because consumers have adapted to that, so the business value to the client is improved by improving the inventory and the convergence with the online store, the e-commerce model, with a traditional model. So now it's all the same model, and now we have the same services and the same features available to us, and we've adapted the model to come up with one instead of two. So there's predictors that say this word e-business and e-commerce will go away. Isn't it just business? Isn't it just commerce? Isn't that how we do things anyway? Who goes to a music store anymore to buy a CD or a record, a vinyl record? No, consumers now buy music online. So the innovators have figured that out. There's no more. Most of the music stores have shut down. Unless you can still find them in old towns or like used bookstores. Most of your bookstores are out of business too. Or not out of business, they've just gone online. Like Barnes & Noble is still a thriving company. It's just not keeping their stores open anymore. Can you do that with Starbucks? No. How about the grocery store? No. So in terms of the e-business, and we know what the difference is between e-business and e-commerce. Do we know the difference between e-business and e-commerce? E-commerce is commerce online, electronic, buying and selling online. E-business is the actual business itself. If you were to turn the plug off, unplug the internet, if you were able to turn it off, the business would go away too. Because it's providing a product or a service or a concept that doesn't exist off of the internet. So a good way of thinking about that is PayPal. Would PayPal exist if you turned off the power on the internet? There's no PayPal equivalent in the real world. PayPal is a company that goes in between banks and facilitates transactions between, if you're not familiar. They're not actually a bank. They're a transaction-oriented facilitator, coordinator. They work with banks and customers and businesses. We wouldn't have a need for that if we if we didn't have an internet. We wouldn't need that at all. Nor would we need. What else would we need? Well, that's a good example. So there's a couple of other businesses that wouldn't have existed. So in the near future, we're going to have bookstores. And who's ever heard of a bookstore? You buy books online. So maybe generations from now, 15 years from now, they go, bookstore, what's that? Well, it's like kind of like when you say grocery store. And now we say grocery store, but like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, certain parts of the U.S., a grocery store, what's that? We go to the farmer's market. Or we go to the something or other, a grocery store. Well, isn't everything become Costco? It's a warehouse now. Grocery store, warehouse. Actually, Walmart's now a grocery store as well. They're no longer Walmart, they're a grocery store too. So, since when did they start selling milk and bread and cheese? So there's a cycle to the innovation. So the e-business innovation cycle, choosing and enabling technologies. We have a processor group that's devoted for looking for emerging technology, IT, and it cycles through. And here's this, just an example of the cycle, looking at the value chain and looking at, well, what do we need to do? We're going to have hopefully some organizational learning that's going to go through a bunch of consecutive stages that we're going to keep repeating over and over again, and we're going to cycle through it until we've made some benefit, hopefully, or we've found a direction. Kind of like throwing darts, I guess. Matching technologies to opportunities, which is kind of an important concept as well. Most promising new technologies matched with current economic opportunities, which is actually kind of interesting because if you think about the concept, if technology follows practice, non-technical practices, we're not being very innovative. It's introducing things that didn't already exist using technology instead of following opportunities that exist in the real world. Classic example is, when the cell phone came out. What's the cell phone? It's just a replacement for the landline phone. It's wireless instead of wired. But then what's innovative is the smartphone concept, where it's not just a cell phone, it's also an internet browser. And it also checks your email and all that stuff. It's like, well, isn't that kind of a replacement as well for the computer? Kind of, sort of, but it's more innovative than just replacing a current technology or a current one with a more technical one, a more innovative one. So. well, there's TV, and then there's internet TV. Isn't it the same as TV? And then now we have XM radio. Isn't it the same as radio? It's not broadcasted the same way. We still have channels and things. So true innovation actually comes from not mimicking non-traditional, or not making traditional stuff more automated. So executing business innovation for growth. So we can do it for opportunities, we can do it for growth, we could do it for cost savings, for productivity. So here's a stage at which changing have actually been implemented. Stage at which change is actually implemented gives us our growth factor, so we can actually implement change as we go through it. And then we also have to assess the value. If we don't assess the value, if we don't benchmark it, or at least try the before and the after, we don't know whether or not we're being effective. So the value that's created for the customer and the internal operations needs to be assessed. So we have 3 ways to think about investments in disruptive innovations. Now, disruptive innovations, just so you're clear on the clear on the definition, it means you're going to replace something. So it's kind of like MP3s that replaced CDs. Cell phones actually, it's disruptive innovation because it disrupts the traditional environment, replaces it with something else. So cell phones that have replaced landlines for the most part. And a lot of companies don't lay wire anymore. They just order a bunch of cellular service. Essentially have wireless. Wireless has replaced wired LAN systems actually. So it's disruptive. So you put the technology ahead of the strategy, and so these are ways of thinking about investments. So technology is so important to success, it needs to be considered first, and you put the strategy second. Strategy is developed afterwards. Or you could put this technology ahead of marketing, which is done a lot actually. Rapid development of technology makes it impossible for people to know what they want actually. It provides too much confusion in the market. We don't know what we want. We have too many features. I think we're going to get this when we get the true automated car in the market. So the Google car, I think, is supposed to be out, what, 2016 or something? Or I don't know. They put a date on it. I can't remember what the date is, but I looked at the date and went, whoa, that's not too far. It's like 5 years or so maybe. Maybe it's 2018 or something. I don't know. So if we're going to put the technology ahead of the marketing, which is what we have, how are we going to sell a Google car if we're Google? How are you going to market that thing? It's almost impossible to predict. And then how do the consumer how do they know that they want that thing? So, which is kind of interesting. It's actually the same thing that happened with the first version of the iPad. Technology was out there before the market was. So here's a great iPad. What do you do with it? So a lot of people who bought them didn't know what to do with it. Well, it's not an ebook reader, but it could be one. We don't have any apps for it yet, or we have very few apps. What do we do with it? So use it for notes. Use it as a secondary computer. So then a lot of people didn't know what to do with it. Innovation is also continuous. It doesn't start and then end. It actually goes on forever. New technologies are constantly being developed. If you're not constantly innovating, you're not keeping up. So just because you had one good innovative year doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop on your innovations. So describing free economies and how the organization can leverage digital technologies to provide free goods, services. So free economies. So the last part of this lecture is kind of interesting in terms of the new kind of perspective for innovations. Free economies is leveraging the digital technologies to provide free goods and services to customers as business strategies for gaining competitive advantage. Isn't that what we get with a lot of the apps that we download for free? Those are free economies. The people that would download something for free. You just got ads. It started with email actually a long time ago with, email providers that gave you an account. Actually, Google never actually gave you ads. Yahoo did though. Or shareware, freeware, free products and services. How does free economies work for Yahoo? The price is set by the products and services at a marginal cost. And the marginal cost for digital services decreases tremendously Makes millions on free email services by placing ads, obviously. So we all know how that works, actually. It's the ads. Google makes money, believe it or not, on Google ads, click ads, and a bunch of other different advertisements as well. They make it differently, though. Like, they don't charge you for Gmail. Gmail's always been free, which is YouTube is free. All this stuff is free. Why is it free? I don't see that much advertisement on Google. When my YouTube page doesn't have any advertisement on it. You know why it's free? They own the data. We're all providing Google with a bunch of data. Not to sound like a paranoid person, but just giving it to them. So I'm giving them everything. They're going to use it. What are they going to use it for? Actually, as an innovator, I don't know what they're going to do with it. So they're going to come up with new products and services that are based on that. They're going to sell us eventually or something. I don't know. Yahoo, it's clear. Actually, Google sells ads too. But actually, there's ads. You can make money on YouTube, actually, by those ads. But they put ads on YouTube. You don't have to use it. But they put ads on YouTube. They'll put ads through Gmail. Depends upon how you're accessing it. Yahoo does the same thing, actually. So it'd be interesting. I've never seen a comparison to see which one has been more effective, but apparently it's very effective advertising. It's like magazines in the old days. The printed magazines, they made all their money on the ads that appeared at the end of it or inside the magazine. So, can you make the same amount of money on an online magazine? Actually, that's another thing that's gone away. Newspapers, printed newspapers. That's a disruptive innovation. Was the use of the internet instead. So the value proposition for free economics and economies. So what do we got here? Someone somewhere is paying for a service. Yes, the value proposition includes more than just buyers and sellers, which is actually kind of interesting because somebody totally unrelated to you is paying for your Gmail accounts, which is kind of interesting. So, plus also Gmail. Well, originally Google's ploy was don't put a bunch of ads on you. So we got market share, or I shouldn't say we. I'm not part of Google, but Google got market share over Yahoo and took it over completely by making it with fewer ads to the consumer. But they found revenue elsewhere, so they didn't need to do it that way. So the consumer uses Google's free search to search for flowers, and then the consumer clicks on sponsored links, and then the consumer is redirected to the advertiser's webpage, and then the advertiser fulfills the order, and then Google gets money. So advertiser pays Google for the click. When you pay per click, they make a lot of money that way, actually. So they provide a free search engine at the same time. So approaches for applying free economies. There's an entire science to this, actually. Advertising, freedom, well, cross subsidies, zero margin costs, labor exchange, gift economies. So in terms of the different examples here, banner ads for advertising, Flickr, Skype, where we're giving you free, minimum amount for free. Actually, if you've used Flickr, for pictures, for Skype, Skype for voice over IP, those are actually pretty popular. Some cloud-based companies do the same thing. They give you like a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, and then you have to pay for premium service, but you get the minimum for free, which some people go for. So. And it's also a good way to lock you in once you've uploaded stuff to Flickr, and then you know, oh, everything's there. I want more. I need more space, and then you upgrade and you start paying. So a lot of it's really in. For the cross subsidies, a Comcast DVR service, the cable companies really know how to do this. Actually, they get you always free Wi-Fi for those willing to buy the new games that are coming out. Free cell phones with a 2-year contract. Zero margin cost products that are distributed to customers without the cost going to them. Online music downloading at iTunes as an example. Software distribution. Video content on YouTube. Customers don't pay for that either, actually. So what do we have here? We have some case studies at the end of this lecture. And the biggest one here is TiVo. Is TiVo still around? TiVo was very innovative for its time. And then the DVRs got replaced with cable providers that gave you better service and put it on a cloud. Need to stay ahead of competition. Then automating recording, scheduling using the web pauses to show movies, search on actors. Actually, TiVo even had one for commercial skipping. Now we receive RSS feeds, watch YouTube videos on TV, and program TiVo from a cell phone. IT department often knows. So imagine that you're in the IT department of a large company and you discover that senior management has been visiting pornography sites. How do you deal with this? This is the senior management. So you fire them, you can't fire them. They're your boss. So you have strategies to grapple the ethical decisions that you have to make. Equipment, whistleblower programs, report violations and let the company handle it. IT professionals should develop a code of ethics, actually, which is actually kind of interesting because you think about it, they're the ones who can monitor your traffic. They're the ones who can monitor telephone calls. I think so. And it's kind of like the government, you know. Rootkit's Sony's secret. Oh, they stopped doing this though. You guys remember that? The digital rights management stuff that they put on. Sony was actually pretty innovative in doing that. So they were using a rootkit to copyright protected CDs so you couldn't copy them or put them on iTunes and stuff. So installed on users' hard drive without their knowledge. And then left computers vulnerable for malicious rootkit, which was discontinued and uninstalled instructions were given to affected customers. Technology gone bad. So in 2007, rootkit in thumb drives. Sony argued they didn't know that they had a rootkit on the thumb drives. But somebody put it on there. Let's see. Gates, file sharing. Here's an interesting one. Who's sharing files? So active customers, accustomed to on-demand lifestyle, informed about current events. The internet is primary source of everything. So conversations focus on tech gadgets, car accessories, home theater setups. And many new Mac users are out there, gamers. So, in terms of who's sharing files, everybody is. So, actually, it's kind of interesting. There was a report that came out not too long ago about the Google search engine. It actually keeps track of everything anyone's ever searched on in the entire world. So it knows what people, and then it does data mining to figure out what the trends are in the users' behaviors and what they're searching on, which is kind of interesting. So they can probably be fairly generic and intrusive at the same time and stealing people's ideas, you know. I'm thinking about like this new product and you're searching on patents on it, you know. So you're giving away your secrets. For sale by owner, your company's name. Oh, I'm so glad this actually has slowed down a little bit. People that in the beginning of the dot bust, or .com I should say, before the dot bust, and the .com, people buying names, so owning somebody else's domain name because they can do it. I think that should have been illegal. It's still going on though. You can buy anything you want. You can get apple.com before Apple figures out they need it. So, and then sell it to Apple. And then, well, actually, now you have the spoofing sites where people buy names that are similar, but they're misspelled. And then they spoof it. So customer types it in and they go, oh, I misspelled it. You know, they don't know. They come to the site, looks like Apple, but they only put one P in there or something, you know. Actually, it's kind of funny to search on things that are misspelled, common misspellings, and you get all these spoof sites that come up, which is actually kind of interesting. Ad space renting. URLs such as Amazon.com. So, all right, what is this? Photo industry. We don't have photos anymore. Do we have film processing? I don't even remember those little Kodak drive-through photo hut photo things. Those are all gone. Now there's drive-through cafenos, coffee shops instead. So. All right, so the second half of today, and I'm only going to go for another half hour, don't worry, is the concept of, this one here is, oops, wrong one, hold on. Let me find the right lecture. Yep, it's this one here. Supply chain management, customer service through customer relationship management. These are big system implementations. And now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty question of initiatives. So major business initiatives, and this is lecture number 4 of the information technology. So this is technology instead of systems, IS, in that series. What I've been doing, if you haven't noticed, is I go one and another. I switch back and forth, rotate between every other lecture. So gaining, again, looking at competitive advantage, and some of you might be thinking, why is she focusing so much on competitive advantages? That's sort of like what we're in business for. Isn't it? Like, you know, most businesses are rooted by competition and are rooted by effectiveness and efficiency and productivity. So I guess I could have a lecture out there that says how to be non-competitive, slow, and non-innovative. So then you'd be working for the government. So some student learning outcomes here. Defining supply chain management systems and describing their strategic and competitive opportunities. So now what we're going to get into is different areas of business that is automated by brand new innovative types of systems that have transformed the way that we're actually doing these businesses and the way that we're actually performing these tasks. Also looking at customer relationship management. I'm going to start this lecture and then I'm going to finish it next week. We're not going to be able to get through all of it. But if you don't have a business background and you are an engineering person, this is all going to be new stuff. If you are a business person, then this stuff should be maybe some familiarity. But you may not know what supply chain management is. You may not know what well, most people know what customer relationship management is because you've all been victim of those systems. But unless you've worked in operations management or supply chain or procurement, maybe you were a buyer in the old days or something, you're maybe not familiar with supply chain. So I'll go through a few fundamental definitions as well. And then defining e-collaboration in terms of business working relationships. And then last but not least, looking at this mostly understood, the biggest, probably the worst, most understood system on earth is this ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, and how that fits into strategic business operations. So explaining the significance of enterprise resource planning, software, integration of functional software systems, and cross-functional systems, which is the trend for today's market. Jellyfish.com was a reverse auction online shopping website. So I don't think they're around anymore. They were acquired in 2007 by Microsoft, announced. And they ended up being a back-end service as part of their live search group of tools. And the site was shut down at midnight, February 2009. It was the first website exclusively for cost per action for shopping. And first gives the revenue for customers by means of rebates on purchases. Good concept. Very innovative. Not so popular, but they turned into something. So SMAC, the group of Jellyfish, or shopping. So SMAC is both. Another company that not around anymore. occurs at the jellyfish.com, which is gone. And if you Wikipedia these, you'll find some interesting information about these innovative sites. Sellers post items at a decreasing price, so buyers jump in and buy when the price is acceptable. So it's reverse auctioning, actually. So we're all familiar with eBay, which is the reverse of the reverse auctioning. So it's true optioning. And now we have social. So what I'm doing is I'm showing you some examples of innovations and systems that have been put into place that have turned into other things that have caused future innovations. This one led to a lot of the search engine concepts, live searching from Jellyfish. This one here ended up into the the reverse auction kind of concept, which is still around. Now we have social commerce and social media being used for marketing, which Most people are familiar with the Jack in a Box commercial with the social media person who is totally out of tune with reality. She's completely online. She thinks the photocopier is a tanning bed. Has no concept, which is actually what's going on right now. So people in the beginning said that, oh, social media, marketing, let's put ads on Facebook, which there's a lot of it. It's very effective to a certain point. And then it gets overboard. And then it goes the opposite direction. And now, as a model, it's kind of backfiring for the most part. So there's a lot of people that put a lot of money into social marketing, and they're still doing it. Social media marketing and social commerce. Let's give it another 5 years to see what happens. In the long run, I don't think it's going to fly. It's not quite what people were looking for. So buyers talk on chat boards. So they encourage each other not to buy too early. It's called social commerce shopping. It actually has been around since Jellyfish. Jellyfish had over 10,000 people participating. When was Jellyfish out? 2007 or prior, actually. They were acquired in 2007. This is old. Nothing new with social media marketing. It's a very old, not yet trusted, not yet tried and true. There's a lot of people that would say, oh, it's not going to be around for very long. Just like these other companies weren't around for very long either. So questions, do you use any of these? Well, most people would use eBay. And does it differ? If it did differ a little bit, are you willing to work with the difference? What's the process of becoming a participant? Is it easy entry in, easy entry out? eBay is actually not so easy to get in. Sorts of products would be best suited for reverse auctioning type of format. And then you get into, well, if you were looking at this stuff and you were going to apply it to business, then that's where you get the supply chain management from. So, supply chain management for the non-business person. Let's see if I can do this any justice. Supply. We know what supplies are. In the old days, we used to have buyers that would sit at a desk with a bunch of books and thumb through the books and get on the phone. I need 10,000 screws. I need 25,000 pieces of sheet metal. They need to be this size. And he or she would go through and buy all this stuff, which not very efficient. How are you going to get the best prices? Well, then they made relationships. It was really a people thing, communication thing, where the buyer knew about their friend over here and their friend over here, and it was really a people-to-people thing. And then the supply chain grew, so it was not more than just office supplies. It was manufacturing supplies, and it was production supplies, and it was supplies for anything the company wanted to buy. And then they got smart, and they said, well, let's just use the internet for that. And then there's supply chain programs where you plug in what you want and it goes out and finds it. So just like people search the internet, it's they have the pull and the push technologies that go on with that. You can push something to a consumer, or you can pull a consumer in to your website. Supply chain management is actually kind of an interesting twist on all of it. You basically put something out there and you wait for people to come to you. It's kind of like putting a live bait in a fish tank and seeing who's going to come over and bite, who's going to eat the bait, which is kind of like the way a lot of the supply chain, or some of the supply chain systems, are working. So supply chain management tracks inventory and information among businesses, processes, and cross companies. In order to get a true system put into place, you have to form some relationships between multiple suppliers. So they're not only not part of your company, they're your supplier. They're participating in your system, and they're doing it all electronically. So this is one way. Originally, it was an attempt to save costs, to get better pricing, to get more automation when it came to the supply chain. Now it's turned into a de facto standard way of doing business, where if you're not part of a supply chain system and you don't know how to use the system, you can't even participate in that industry. How are you going to sell CD-ROM drives? You can't do it. How are you going to do this? So it actually changed the way people did businesses. So the system itself, the supply chain management system, supports the supply chain management and its operations and what it's doing. We have other things that work along with it. As an example, this old word, just in time, the Japanese way of doing business, the method for producing and delivering products and services just in the time the customer wants it. Well, that ended up being a key feature of effective supply chain management, and Dell uses just in time to deliver customer computers, actually. So it's this inventory-less, parts-less, supply-less, no warehouse. You put it all online, you put it on an intranet, you get strategic partners to work with you, your suppliers. You run through, and then the automobile manufacturing is probably the best example for this. The customer walks into a showroom, says, oh, I like that car, how long will it take to order it? Oh, okay, 2 weeks, no problem, I don't know, whatever. Puts the order into the system. So the sale comes in through the customer from the dealership, goes to the manufacturer. Let's say it's a, I don't know, a Ford car or something, I don't know, something American. Is Ford still in business? Yeah. And then Ford has, let's say they manufacture in China, which is really bad. I'm just making up this example. So the order comes in from the dealership, goes to the manufacturing headquarters, gets entered in, and it's already in the supply chain management system. So we know we want this car, and these are the specs. And then at the same time, simultaneously, 500,000 other people also did the same thing. That's all in the system. And so it makes it to the manufacturing site all electronically. And the manufacturing site figures out, well, how many do we have on hand, and how many do we need to make? This is all done electronically as well. And this is, oh, we need to make 5,000 of these things. Okay? And then it's put through the computer-aided manufacturing system that's doing the part selection and creating the parts list and doing the supply chain stuff. So then all of the little pieces of all the parts that need to go into this assembly and the manufacture of this is already sourced out automatically. That's hundreds of thousands of little parts and pieces and things that go into this assembly. That's going to happen at the manufacturing plant out there in China. And it's all communicated electronically to the plant, to the system that's in China that is going to do the assembly and the manufacture. So no one's going to sit there and say, okay, we got 500,000 of these suckers we're going to make, and whatever it is. We already know how many pieces of glass we need and what size. We already know how many door hinges we need, how many, because all the cars have the same parts from the same suppliers. So if you buy one Ford, it has the same door handles, another one has another one. If you haven't noticed, most of the parts have similar pieces. Most of the cars have similar parts on them from the same manufacturer, especially if they're the same line. So you have from the customer order all the way to the build completely automated to the point where the pieces are just showing up at the manufacturing site out there in China when they need to show up because they need to be used for that day's assembly or for that day's production on the assembly line. And it just shows up, and then that gets billed back to the supplier, and then they get paid directly. And then all of it is done without any humans involved. That's supply chain management on steroids, which is pretty much what's happening these days. That system is a couple $1 million to put it together. You're only going to do it if you're a big company. If you're making cars, or if you're making boats, or planes, or trains, or whatever, you're making something huge, and you're making a lot of them, and it's worth the investment. Because if you were to do it manually, it's impossible. If you're making toy pieces, or actually, most of the computer, well, Apple has a supply chain management system. Most of the big companies that do manufacturing are going to have supply chain management. So what ends up happening is as the order comes in, the suppliers know, oh, they have 500 of these cars or whatever. So it knows you're this glass manufacturer. You're the supplier of glass for Ford. You log into the system, or maybe the system sends you an email and says, hey, this order just came in, and they're going to need glass. And then you supply them with the glass at a pre-authorized price and terms and everything that's already configured into the system. And you ship them the glass, and it shows up at the manufacturing plants, ready to be used in the cars, without any humans being involved, which is actually kind of innovative. So if you're working in supply chain, you're basically working for the system. You're working for this big old supply chain management system. So Dell's effective supply chain management system through just-in-time manufacturing and just-in-time delivery, what they tried to do, which is a big issue for computer manufacturing, is let's just have a warehouse-less manufacturing facility. Because what we don't want to do is spend the money to house the parts. Because what you don't want to do is order a bunch of stuff. It was like what people do. If you're going to build something, normally you would just order a bunch of stuff. It arrives. And then when everything arrives, you put it together. You can't do that. So you have parts and pieces of it put together, and you don't have an inventory of parts. Everything just shows up, it gets used. Shows up, it gets used. That's streamlined. And that's the best case scenario. It never happens that way. Instead, what happens is you have a warehouse full of stuff. It's like, when did we use these? Oh, they double shipped it. Oh. Or, oh, they canceled the order. Oh, or something happened with technology. So what do we have here? We have high and low inventory with time. So selling and sourcing of Dells occurs throughout time, keeping inventory low. You don't want inventory. You don't want it in manufacturing, and you also don't want it in distribution. So holding inventory on a typical computer retail occurs here. So typical computer retailers are inventory, buy, hold, sell. So selling a typical computer retailer occurs here. We don't want that. We want to be down here on the bottom in this Dell model where Dell has its inventory and then it ships. It's kind of like what the bookstores are doing. So you go to barnesandnoble.com and you order a book. There's no Barnes & Noble warehouse out there that has a bunch of books in it. Not like the bookstores. It's not being shipped from a bookstore either. It's going directly from the publisher, drop shipped to the customer, skipping the middleman completely. They stamp a Barnes & Noble label on it, if you're lucky. Actually, I think they do. They put a Barnes & Noble label on the box. But Barnes & Noble never saw that item. It didn't come. They're the transaction facilitator. So that goes from the manufacturer, which is the bookseller, or publisher, all the way to the customer. So here's another example in terms of our intermodal transportation. So most supply chains use intermodal transportation, multiple transportation channels, railways, trucks, planes, to move the products from origin to destination. Create supply chain complexities. How are you going to figure out the cost of that? So your glass is coming from Italy, being shipped to China by 5 different modes of transportation. We have to figure out how much is that window going to cost. Glass is actually kind of expensive if you haven't figured that out. If you've ever tried to replace the windshield on your car, it's like it's a piece of glass. Glass is a commodity. It's cheap. That windshield is about $500–600 or so, depending upon what kind of car you got. Why is it so expensive? Because it's cut from the manufacturer, it goes through so many different channels, and by the time it actually gets to the car, it's expensive. So, create supply chain complexities. Opportunities for supply chain management systems as a business strategy. In order to get the overall cost leadership, you got to use one of these systems. Bottom line initiative. Cut the bottom line. Remember bottom line, top line? It's a bottom line initiative to reduce the bottom line. Running the organization here in terms of the framework also works with that. And it helps the organization run with fewer people. So you could be a car manufacturer and only have like maybe 10 people in the business office. And you're thinking, well, they're producing our product like that. Actually, manufacturing houses don't run with too many management. You don't need them. You need a good scheduler, a good CAD person, probably designer kind of person, and someone who knows how to run an operations system, operations manager. The goal is to squeeze out every penny and cost possible in the supply chain, because every one of those single little hops where it changes different transportation mode or it changes hands, it's going to cost you too much. So optimize fulfillment, logistics, production, revenue, profits, and costs, and also the price. So we have IT support for supply chain management. Actually, the coolest thing is the manufacturing management systems. So in the manufacturing floors, if it's automated completely, the sub-assemblies keep track of themselves. So there's nobody out there counting parts or pieces. You put little RF tags on it, or you put some sort of sensor on it. when the engines have made it past a certain point, they're automatically counted by the line assembly and the robotics that are using it. So there's, one or two or three people out there, not too many people. Not like the old days when you see them producing cars and you have like thousands of people out there. Labor's expensive. So you get robotics, you get sub-assemblies, you get the inventory to keep track of itself. So, or the sub-assemblies to keep track of itself. So supply chain management systems pioneered by specialist companies. And there's still not too many people that make those systems. Same thing as ERP. So now it's also part of ERP, enterprise resource planning. An enterprise resource planning system is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not cheap. Supply chain management systems, not cheap either. You buy them together, you're not, the combination of the two, you're saving a little bit of money than buying them separately, but they're still very expensive. They're expensive because they're very small niched market, and you're selling them to really big companies. How many really big companies do we have out there? So most of the cost or revenue after the initial sale is through the maintenance and through the customization. Only problem as well is you can't go to Fry's or you can't just buy one of these systems, put it in, and expect the system to do everything, which is where a lot of the failures come into place. So a lot of companies spend a lot of money on these big systems. They don't transform the business to work with the system, and then it ends up not producing any results for them. So you learn more about supply chain knowledge base, supply chain management review, I2 technologies, CIO magazines. If you go through any of those higher end CIO, CTO magazines, you'll see a bunch of ads for supply chain management ERP systems, and all from like one or two companies. It's not a big industry. So I think I will stop at this point because it's a good stopping point. And next time we'll cover a little bit on customer relationship management, hit a little bit more on supply chain management as an innovation, and look at the integration of all the different pieces and parts together. And then now's the time we start specializing a little bit on different managements of different types of technologies, like supply chain, or I don't think they call supply chain technology, but it's a technology area in terms of technology innovations for that particular area. Okay, we're done for today. Unless you have questions, comments, or concerns. Or you want to do attendance again, we can do that one more time. All right, we're done then.